like to call to order the City of Belton Planning Commission meeting. This is Tuesday, December 19, 2023. Could we have the roll call, please?
Chairman McPherson.
Here.
Mayor Larkey.
Here.
Councilmember Pryan.
Here.
Commissioner McDonough.
Here.
Commissioner Monahan Bass. Commissioner Vest. Commissioner Walton.
Here.
Commissioner Warren. Commissioner Wilson.
Here. All right, thank you. We have a couple of items on our agenda this evening. First would be for the approval of our December 5th Planning Commission meeting as they've been printed and distributed. Is there a motion to accept?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
All right,
Second.
Thank you for the second. Any additions, corrections that need to be made? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting as printed, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item we have is a non-public hearing. This is FDP 2023-09, an application for final development plan for Cass County Dental, a proposed 5,600 square foot dental office located at the northwest corner of East Markey Parkway and Town Center Drive. And we will hear from our city planner.
Thank you. An application was filed for a final development plan to develop a 5,600 square foot dental office and parking lot at the northwest corner of Markey Parkway and Town Center Drive, or 1000 East Markey Parkway. The subject property is currently zoned C2 General Commercial and is bound by Menards, RG Federal Credit Union, and Center 301. The property is currently vacant. The plan meets all site design and parking requirements except for a modification to exceed the maximum allowed foot candle at the property line from 1 to 5 foot candles in terms of their lighting plan. The required parking for the site is 10 spaces, but the proposed plan provides 34 plus 2 ADA spaces, which is triple the requirement, but the applicant intends to use the space for annual board meetings and events, thus needing more parking than required. All ingress and egress points are located off the newly constructed access drive that connects to the Markey Parkway and will sufficiently serve the development. The parking lot also includes a driveway connection to the north to allow cross-access between future parking lots. Markey Parkway has existing sidewalks, and there are proposed 5-foot sidewalk connections from the entrance of the dental office to Markey Parkway, as well as along the access drive into the site. The development plan meets all landscape area requirements and has a proposed mix of ornamental trees, shade trees, shrubs, and native grasses all around the building and the parking lot. Currently, the plan indicates a underground detention system, which will be used to accommodate all stormwater requirements. However, the property is also located in the Markey Regional Detention Area, which would be allowed to change the on-site detention plan if the buy-in fees are acceptable to the applicant. Updated stormwater and drainage plans would be required prior to building permit issuance if that is the case. The proposed building is a one-story, 5,538 square foot building that is oriented on the corner of the new access drive and Markey Parkway, allowing 3 sides of the building to face the street frontage. The proposed building elevations provide 4-sided architecture with the exterior predominantly made up of windows, architectural metal and wood paneling, and white stucco. An 8x4 masonry monument sign is also proposed on the southeast corner of the site, which meets all signage standards. I'll just run through these renderings so you guys can see all the different sides. And with that, staff recommends approval of the final development plan with the 8 conditions listed in the staff report. I'm here for questions, and the architect is here for questions as well.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for staff or for?
Go back to what you talked about, the candle moving from 1 to 5. What's up with that?
The submitted photometric plan, which is the lighting plan for the site, shows an increased foot candle at the property line. In the conditions, I have requested that a updated photometric plan be provided with final building permits, just so we can get to a lower foot candle than it is currently shown.
And the location of where those two parking lot lights will be is on the east side of the property, which will eventually connect into future commercial development as well. So it will be likely kind of a shared parking and access drive. So and that's fairly common in commercial developments to have that parking, shared parking lot lighting. So staff does not see any concerns with that.
Has this entrance already been approved? The roadway, I'm sorry, not the entrance, the roadway.
Yeah, the roadway currently is in review by staff. Some revisions were sent to the engineer team today for that. But yes, that is being reviewed and permitted separately from the dental office.
All right. You got any issues with it?
Any additional questions?
I have no further.
Anyone care to make a motion?
I'd make a motion that we approve the final development plan FDP-2023-09 as presented.
Second. Lots of seconds.
All right. We have a motion and 2 seconds. Any final comments, questions? Seeing none, could we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner McDonough? Aye. Councilmember Pryan?
Aye.
Mayor Larkey?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Walton?
Yes.
Chairman?
Aye. So that application has been approved. So, moving on, we will call to order a public hearing. This is,
Thank you.
yes, thank you for being here. This is public hearing UDC 2023-06, request to consider text amendments to the Unified Development Code UDC related to placemaking in the Old Town Belton Overlay District and signage citywide. And our Community Development Director.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Before you this evening are UDC text amendments to chapters 18, section 18-2 for the Old Town Belton Overlay District, and then chapter 30, which is our sign code related to placemaking and signage. So I'll just start off with section 18-2, which is the Old Town Belton Overlay. This was adopted in 2011 and has not had any amendments since. And just in some of the potential projects that we've been inquired about, as well as some potential projects that we're currently working on, there are some challenges with this overlay district in not doing a great job of accommodating the existing building stock and the lots that we have in place. So in Old Town, which this is predominantly concentrated along both Main Street and Commercial Street, most of those lots are 24-foot wide lots with, in some cases, 100% building coverage with 0 setbacks on all sides. And the current standards do not accommodate that at all. And so that makes it really difficult for infill development or redevelopment to happen under those standards. And so what staff is proposing is to modify those dimensional standards that are currently in place to distinguish between the Main Street frontage lots, which would be allowed to keep those 24-foot wide lots and develop those with 0-foot setbacks on all sides, up to 100% building coverage. And then all other lots, which would be lots that aren't on Main Street, so that would be Commercial, Cherry, some of the side streets going down to North Avenue. those essentially would have double the lot size requirements, and their setbacks would be still smaller than what is typically elsewhere in the city, but would accommodate the existing development, generally in keeping with the development that's on those side streets. There is also quite a bit of text that was in there previously related to screening, landscaping, sidewalks, street improvements, parking. We are proposing to eliminate all that and simplify that into 3 basic categories. So first would be building design, which is essentially just stating in this overlay district that the building shall be oriented towards the public street, and shall have 4-sided architecture on all sides. So the same quality of design and materials on all 4 sides, which in a lot of cases may just be the front and the rear because the side walls are shared and not visible. And then we have a site design requirement, again, focusing the building entrances on the public sidewalk, off-street parking, generally located behind the building facades, so we don't end up with parking lots directly on Main Street, but they're utilizing Loop Road and the alleys for their parking access. And then off-street parking. Currently, there is not a distinction on off-street parking requirements for Old Town versus the rest of the city. What that does is obviously presents some challenges because, again, we don't want potentially historic buildings torn down for parking lots. So in order to accommodate that, what a lot of other area cities have done with their downtown is reduce their parking requirements because we do have on-street parking and some other parking options. So with that, staff is proposing that there is not a parking requirement for any pre-existing buildings, but for new development or redevelopment, they accommodate off-street parking at a rate of 50% of what's currently required in the code. So for example, a single or a residential unit typically requires 2 spaces per unit. If you're in Old Town, that would be 1 space per unit. And then we also, for site design, we've made an exception to fence standards and fence locations. Currently, the fence setback is 6 feet from a street side. We're proposing to make that essentially 0 for rear yards on Main Street. Reason for that is if the building is at 0 foot, it doesn't really make sense that the fence be set in further than the building. The fence is much less of an obstruction than the building itself. So allowing people to match that side setback, which allows the 24-foot wide yards to be better utilized. And then the last section is really focusing on placemaking, which I included a general definition of placemaking in the code, and that's generally defined as enhancing local assets to create quality public spaces where people want to live, work, and visit. So these are just things that help make downtown more of a destination and more attractive for the community. And so with that, some of these items were already in the current code, including providing on-street or on-site amenities, pedestrian amenities for the site. So that it could include bike racks, outdoor seating, trash receptacles, other similar features like that. However, we're also proposing to exempt properties that have a 0-foot setback on Main Street from that requirement because there's not going to be space for that. And the Main Street already provides some of those in the form of benches that they have outside some of the retail spaces. We've also added a provision for outdoor dining and seating areas just to make it clear that those are permitted both on the property itself, but also in the right-of-way on the sidewalk, as long as it is not obstructing any required pedestrian access ways. So a minimum requirement has to be met for ADA access, but on some of the sidewalks where the sidewalk is wide enough, you could still potentially have some small bistro tables out there, which would help encourage and support more dining and food-related businesses. And then the last piece of placemaking is specifically related to signage, and there is some additional sign code updates that will follow this related to that. So we're basically just talking about pedestrian-oriented signage and encouraging that on Main Street, including projecting, awning, and under canopy signs, as well as a new sign type that we're adding to the sign code for sidewalk signs. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the sign code changes. But in terms of what is being removed here, most of these items are already accompanied in these changes, but a few things that we did remove that we did not feel are necessary include the screening and landscaping requirement. There was a requirement in the current code that anytime there's a commercial development adjacent to a residential development in the Old Town overlay, that you put in a 4 to 6 foot high berm, which essentially just creates this significant grading separation. In a lot of cases, there's not room for that. And it also doesn't seem necessary because most of those sites are going to already be separated from residential by the alleyway. Sidewalk, it mentioned the sidewalk requirement. That is already addressed elsewhere in our code through the subdivision process as well as through the Public Works Design and Construction Manual. Same with the street. Parking lot landscaping, I mean, that's elsewhere in our code. And also, we're not really encouraging a significant development of parking lots in Old Town. And then review procedures and action on application, that's already addressed elsewhere in the code as well. Any questions on the Old Town overlay changes?
Is this something that we're just cleaning up, or has it been, you've heard from businesses or future businesses that there's some problems in there that we need to get corrected?
We have heard from a few property owners who have wanted to make changes, particularly on the fence. The fence issue has become an issue on a couple of properties. We've also had several properties that may have 5 or 10 feet at the rear of their property along Loop Road that have wanted to maybe put a pergola structure or add some additional outdoor seating or event areas. And allowing them to do that with this 0 foot setbacks just helps people to more fully utilize their properties along Main Street. Right, and then for the sign code, there's quite a few updates here just that we've made based on some of the sign permits and the sign requests and things that we've experienced over the past year since we last made any updates to the sign code. First, there's just some clarifications on when permits are required. All permits are required, or all permanent signs are required a sign permit, as well as commercial temporary signs and inflatable signs. All the other sign types are not required a permit. They just have to meet the standards, and most of those are just generally temporary signs in nature associated with specific events. We just cleaned up the fee table a few months ago, so we're striking that part 2, which doesn't exist anymore. Another thing that comes up on occasion is related to flags. So we did add some flag standards. Most cities have those. We do not. So there's some things about a wall-mounted flag being exempt from the sign code as long as it's less than 20 square feet mounted to the building. And then for signs that are allowed without a permit, we've added, currently there's temporary private event signs, and we're adding public and private event signs to that. We've added grand opening signs as being allowed without a permit. The main reason for doing that is we do have a lot of businesses that continue to open in the city, and we provide the information to the businesses of what the sign requirements are, but obviously those can be, with the number of businesses that are opening, that becomes a difficult task to get those permitted, especially when they have a lot of other processes they're going through. We don't want to throw, as long as they're meeting those sign restrictions, we don't want to make it more difficult for them another permit for them to have to get during that time. And they're only good for a certain period of time anyway. And most businesses have been really good about complying with those limited time standards. We've added flags as not requiring permits and have put some standards on there. These are, almost every city in the metro uses these standards, allowing up to 3 flags per business, height of 35 feet for a pole, up to 40 square feet of flag area per flag. And then we did add that they be set back at least 10 feet and not interfere with any buildings, structures, or other utilities that may be within 10 feet of a property line. So potentially a flag pole may need to be shifted further away if it's a larger flag and it may interfere with power lines or anything like that. And then also just wall-mounted incidental signs, which are any sign that's less than 9 square feet in size. We did add some clarification to our landscaping standards for monument signs. Currently, there's some standards, it just says it must be landscaped in the sign code, and then there's some more detailed standards in the landscaping code. But we wanted to add that to this so it's clear and all in one place. We did specifically put, because it just says ground cover could be interpreted to be grass. And so we've specifically put non-turf grasses as ground cover to make that clear. And that landscaping standard is a minimum of 3 feet around all sides of the monument sign. And then with master signage plans, currently it specifically says that sign plans must be submitted with all final development plans. However, there are a number of final development plans we've had recently where signage may not be proposed, or they may not know who the tenant is, so they don't really know what their signage is going to be. So we just specified which, in the situation that signage is proposed, we will require that. And that's specifically more important for restaurants and other uses, particularly drive-through uses, because they typically have additional signage that's good to review, and usually there are some exceptions that are requested to the code through those types of facilities. For actual sign standards per zoning district, the only change that we're proposing to make is for commercial zoning districts. Currently, a larger monument sign is allowed for shopping centers over 100,000 square feet. However, we're proposing to add an exception to that and add for shared monument signs as well for multi-tenant developments that have a minimum of 400 linear feet of I-49 frontage. The main reason for that is in the past, there were a lot of pole signs installed along I-49 for Cracker Barrel, for Freddy's, a number of other businesses, kind of in the between 2010 and 2015, 2016. And we do get a lot of requests from other businesses in that area for larger signs. But since we do not allow new pole signs, we think this is a better option to allow some taller monument signs along the I-49 corridor just for some added visibility. And the max height on that is set at 30 feet, 300 square foot sign area. And then we get into more specific sign types. So incidental signs, we're just cleaning that up. Currently, the incidental sign section is specifically related to businesses with drive-through facilities. However, it's pretty common for a number of different facilities to utilize directional signs to direct traffic. Southview Commerce Center is one example where that's not a drive-through facility, but they have a lot of truck traffic, so they need to be able to direct vehicles in and out of the site. And I think that's something that we're going to continue to see more of requests for. So we are dropping the specific drive-through facility limitation and just saying a maximum of 2 signs may be permitted per driveway from a public or private street. So essentially any business could utilize that if they feel that it's necessary, that they need to better direct traffic. And again, any exceptions to that could be requested and approved by the commission with a final development plan. Another thing that we run into that we don't see a lot in other cities is we currently have a prohibition on commercial messaging on any incidental sign. And so there are actually a number of them that have been approved that already have that. So for example, McDonald's, they have directional signs that have an arch on it. Panera has their logo on theirs. We don't see that as being an issue, and we've run into some situations, or could run into situations, where you have a multi-tenant building and a drive-through on one end cap, and then they can't figure out which business they're going to because it's just a sign that just says drive-through, but it doesn't actually say what business it's for. So eliminating that makes that possible. The other thing is we're striking out monument sign because currently the code requires that any of these directional signs be a monument sign. And so a lot of them in the past have been small pole signs or post signs where they have two small poles holding up the sign. We don't think that that is an issue aesthetically. In a lot of ways it actually, the current monument sign actually makes it more noticeable and kind of detracts from the sign itself. So we're proposing to strike that. On temporary signs, we are striking fireworks tent, and I will get to that in a second. In its place, we're putting a sidewalk sign, and then we are crossing out incidental because that's already addressed elsewhere in the code, and then adding inflatable signs to the bottom. So this is just some general cleanup, but the addition of a couple of new sign types. All other temporary signs that are not listed here are considered a commercial temporary sign, and those require permits. So that's essentially any business that's advertising a sale, for example, and they have a temporary sign out for a couple of months while they're having a sale. Those aren't addressed in here, but those are required a permit. So we just did a kind of a catch-all for all other signs as a commercial temporary sign. Clarifying that only inflatable signs and commercial temporary signs need a permit, and we're changing it from a maximum of essentially 3 months to 4 months. That's more in keeping with what a lot of other cities have done, and you're allowed to have that for a maximum of 30 days. So essentially, you could go ahead and have your sign up for 4 months straight, and then take it down for 8 months. We are eliminating this period of 60 days must elapse between a time a temporary sign permit expires and a new permit be issued. Again, just because a lot of times somebody may have a seasonal sale and that's the only time that they want to advertise. So it doesn't really make sense to have signs keep going up and then taking them down for 60 days and put up another one for 30 days. It's not really been an issue that we've had. And this just kind of cleans up the code and actually helps businesses get their sign permits the way that they're actually operating their business, rather than us having to go after them or ignore them in some situations. It just cleans up the code. Another thing is on real estate signs, we're making an exception for multifamily developments to have up to 3 signs per street frontage when it's located on a single lot or a common tract. So you'll see, for example, both the Encore Apartments and Center 301 have some additional signage, which makes sense on a larger development like that to have some additional now leasing signs or something like that. So we've limited that to 3 signs per street frontage. And then the last few are the some of the modifications that we're making. So we've had a number of questions over the last couple of years regarding fireworks signage and how that's kind of been enforced or not enforced in the past. And so reading through the definition of temporary public events, it specifically talks about public purpose, charitable, religious, not-for-profit associations or fraternal organizations. Essentially, almost, I believe, all of our fireworks tents actually fall into one of those categories. So it seemed like a good opportunity to go ahead and throw fireworks tents into this, which does allow them to have some off-premise. They're allowed up to 18 signs throughout the city, including some off-premise signs that they can get permitted with owner's consent. And that's been one of the concerns that we've had is if we enforce the code the way it has previously been written, you could only have one fireworks sign and it could only be a small sign on the actual tent property. And that's not been how fireworks signs have actually been installed throughout the city. So the way we've handled it in the past, as long as it's not in the right of way and there's not been an excessive number of them, we haven't had any issues or enforcement on that. So this just kind of essentially cleans that up and makes that the way that it's been handled in the past. And you're allowed to have up to we changed it up to 32 square feet on the sign where the sign is taking place, but we're not specifically saying you can only have one on the tent location. You could have multiple. We just ask that you leave it no more than 18 throughout the entire city. And then adding sidewalk signs. So this is the new sign type that's specifically for businesses on Main Street. And it would allow temporary signs that are on the public sidewalk. Again, it would be similar to the outdoor seating where it can't create any kind of encroachment. But a number of businesses on Main Street already are doing this. The brewery does it. The Mary's Mountain Cookies does it, where they have a small sign that they put out during the day and they take it back. It's only out during business hours and they bring it back in. So that's just clarifying that that is a permitted sign type. And again, it just helps make Main Street, helps build that placemaking and character, and helps promote the businesses on the street. Almost done. The murals, currently murals are only allowed in Old Town Belton. We are proposing to cross that and put that in all non-residential zoning districts, those be allowed. We've also modified some of the language there, where currently it just says murals deemed advertising signs, billboards, or graffiti are not permitted. We're removing the word graffiti because that's sort of open to interpretation of what that is. And instead of, we are changing encourage from not permitted. But we are adding an original designer representation which contains limited references to the establishment, product, or service provided on the site may be permitted. We took that from a couple of other cities that have similar language. Having it currently the way it's written, basically it just says it's not encouraged. Well, that means you can pretty much do that. So just kind of tightening that up a little bit, but also allowing some flexibility in some creative design is helpful to have in there. The reason why we felt like murals should be expanded beyond Old Town Belton is we are obviously making a push. We have a public art commission that's getting started. Placemaking is a big part of this code amendment. And so there's opportunities on buildings on North Scott and some other commercial corridors where murals could be appropriate and would be encouraged and supported. I think this is almost the end. The last thing is the grand opening event signs. Currently, we have signage is limited to 30 days after opening. We're proposing to extend that to 60 days. That just gives businesses a little bit more time to get, the word out that they are open, and also making it clear that inflatable signs, the inflatable sign permit is only good for 30 days instead of 60. And I think we're almost done. Just this inflatable signs has become a bit of an issue because we don't have a lot of, the way that it was written was very open-ended, so there was no size or height restriction, and there wasn't a length of time. So we have been asked previously for some fairly crazy sign heights for some of these. So I think we need to rein that in. So the maximum height we are proposing is 10 feet. And then the maximum time period would be 30 days. And then that is it on the sign code. So quite a few things there, but things that we frequently run into. Jenna gets questions about signs probably 5 times a day. So this just helps clean up some of the more frequently asked questions and also will streamline the sign permitting process. Questions on the sign code updates?
So
Go ahead.
if I understand, the permit is not required for the temporary public event signs, is that correct? So like the fireworks tent, because that line was stricken
Correct.
from the,
Yeah, and currently, any kind of public events or private events do not have to get a permit. Only the fireworks tents were the only temporary events that had to get sign permits in the past. And we were kind of in a weird place because we could only approve them for one sign. But going through old records, there were some of the tents that would also give us a list of like 15 other locations they were going to post this sign, and it just got attached to the back of the permit. And so we were essentially approving things that weren't allowed by the code. So this just makes it clean it up based on kind of how it's been handled in the past, and we don't feel like we need to review those permits. They're usually only good. They're only usually up for about 7 days as it is. So it saves them $30 in permit fees, and it saves us time not having to.
Takes longer to get the
Issue
sign
those.
permit than
Yeah.
the sign to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, when you say, I mean, temporary sign is, and you referenced a couple people on the sidewalk ones, is that, how do you define temporary? If they could put that up there every day, would you call that temporary, or is there a, they can only, for so many days they can have it up and they have to take it down? I think you were talking about that.
So there's two different kinds of temporary signs. There's there's temporary signs that banners and things like that are only associated with limited duration events. So those are temporary signs. A temporary commercial sign is a banner or something like that that's up for a 30-day sale. The other signs are not considered temporary. They're just movable signs. So the sidewalk signs, trying to think of others, but the feather flags that people may be putting up for like a leasing of the apartment complex, something like that. Those don't require permits through us, but they're still subject to the number and height and location standards.
Gotcha. And then, is there any regulation around, like, people holding signs, like, car wash this way or come this way?
There is not. That's actually specifically exempt from our sign code as people holding signs.
That
So
they can? If
They
it's a-
can, as long as they're not impeding traffic in any way. So the guy that's always handing out in front of the car wash
Yeah.
at Starlight is allowed to do that.
is that how we, I won't go there. I was gonna say, is that how those
I think there-
panhandlers get
I
away
think
with
there's
it?
some
There's some
constitutional rights.
There's some First Amendment rights that are associated
Yeah.
with that, with freedom of speech and their ability to do that. But yes, that is specifically in here. Signs carried by a person are exempt from this chapter.
I know we hear that every once in a while, and that's why I just wanted to,
Yeah, they're out on the sidewalk. They're not in the street blocking traffic. So
Don't forget the tax companies, they're gonna start
oh yeah.
warming up.
All right, any other questions or comments for the director? This is a public hearing, so I will ask if there's anyone here to speak in favor or in opposition.
There's only one.
Ask one more time. And seeing none, we will close the public hearing and leave it open for the commission. Any additional questions or comments? I think that as I read through here, it looked like it really did help to clean up and help explain some of those things a lot clearer. And so I think it's good work that staff has put in on putting this together for us. All right. So if there are no more comments or questions, do we have a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion to accept it.
All right, thank you.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any final comments? Seeing none, could we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Commissioner Walton,
Yes.
Chairman McPherson,
Aye.
Commissioner McDonough, Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Councilmember Pryan.
Aye.
All right. Next item, Director, do you have an update for us on the comprehensive plan?
yes, so I did include a PowerPoint presentation that was also given to the City Council last Tuesday. This is a community input review of the comprehensive plan. So the Confluence team put together a summary for the steering committee that met on November 29th. And so this is just kind of a a shortened version of that, of the results from the ETC survey that was conducted from late September through the end of October, in which there were 400 households that participated in the statistically valid survey. And then also during that time period, the consultants met with a number of community stakeholders and held several community meetings for input as well. So all of that helped to get us to kind of where we're at in this presentation. And I'll just go over a few highlights of that. And each page, each slide has a specific topic with it. So, starting with transportation, a majority of respondents really support or believe that all modes of transportation are important or very important. With the exception of bus travel, that one only received 31%, but that makes sense. We don't currently have bus service provided in the city, but there's still 31% of community members who still believe that there is some importance to that, and that's something that could potentially be expanded on in the future. Overall, though, particularly roadway and vehicular investments are where the priorities are, as well as some sidewalk connectivity and improvements. Particularly, over 90% of respondents are concerned about traffic flow at intersections and just general roadway upgrades. But we also saw roadway capacity, connectivity across I-49 being some concerns as well. For Parks and Rec, 84% of respondents were very supportive of continuing to maintain and improve existing facilities. And there's also support for expanding Parks and Rec facilities with new buildings, trails, playgrounds, and other recreational amenities, as well as acquiring some additional land. Improving access to those facilities was also very important through the existing transportation system. Trails was one of the bigger topics in the survey and what we've heard from the community in the past and through this process. 69% of respondents prioritize the development of multi-use trails to connect parks and recreation facilities. They also want to see, majority want to see connections across the city at major intersections, as well as connections to existing trails, downtown Belton, and schools. There was some questions about sustainability. A majority of 71% support green initiatives, including green spaces and park development, waste reduction and recycling programs, and 65% support energy efficient building upgrades. Housing obviously is a big need in the city, and there were some questions about the supply of housing and then what housing is needed. When you look at what housing types are needed, that is essentially every housing at every income in the city. But then when there's a question about what types of housing, a significant majority of the city does believe that there's an adequate supply of apartments, and a lot of that is likely due to just the significant number of new units that have come online over the past year in the city. But one thing that is a little surprising there is we also had 76% of respondents say that housing for families earning more than $88,000 a year, there's an adequate supply of, which we generally hear the opposite of. We hear that there's a significant need for additional higher end and move up housing in the city. And then also manufactured housing and townhomes rose up there. So in general, I think the takeaway from that is if you look at the bottom section there, there's just a need for housing for everybody in the city, regardless of what type of housing it is. We need it at all income levels. In terms of community satisfaction, 70% of those that responded were very satisfied or satisfied with living in Belton. There are some smaller percentages, though, when it comes to their feeling of safety in their neighborhoods as a place to raise children, the overall quality of life, which doesn't get into details specifically about what may make that quality of life lower than being satisfied as living here. And then the feeling of safety and community, just a little over half responded to that. But you will see that there's a higher percentage of people that feel safe in their neighborhoods. So there just may be certain places outside of their neighborhood that they may feel less safe. Some of the neighborhood actions include 86% of those that responded believe that the city should take action to ensure that streets and sidewalks are designed for all ages and abilities. So that particularly gets into ADA access. Some other items that are important to note, flood resistance and resilience is supported, new senior housing and aging in place. Social services, particularly those that address homelessness, was supported by 64% of those that responded, and then making sure there's adequate transportation access for new developments. Some future items, when asked about the future of Belton, 71% of respondents agreed that we should continue to accommodate small business growth and expansion. Particularly related to downtown, 82% felt that we should preserve historic places. 76% wanted us to continue to find a way to maintain a small town feel. And then we also had a lot of comments on improving the appearance of residential neighborhoods. There were some other comments made about commercial corridors as well. Improving parks and open space, and then encouraging additional employment opportunities. The survey, about half the survey was probably related specifically to parks facilities. One of the questions was a list of, I believe, about 27 different amenity types. And the top 5 of those came out to be walking and hiking trails being the top amenity that the residents would like to see more of. Fishing, boating, sailing in areas and marinas. Outdoor amphitheater, large playgrounds, and large regional parks. So those are kind of the general priorities. And again, there's high, medium, and low priorities based on the responses that we did receive. So with that, the Confluence team took all of that information that they received from the survey, the stakeholder meetings, and the community meetings, and came up with 8 key themes that they're going to focus various chapters and goals and objectives on the comp plan around. So the first one, which I think we all can agree is needed, is to address the housing issues. So again, there's a strong need for housing overall to suit every stage of life, income group, from affordable to high end. The next theme would be focusing on downtown and historic preservation. The Old Town blocks are included as a separate sub-area that we'll have a focus on, so this ties into that. There was a strong desire to continue to enhance downtown, support local businesses, expand the hours of downtown was something that continuously came up, making it more than just an 8 or 9 to 5 business district, focusing on more restaurants and retail, and providing safe access to downtown for residents in surrounding neighborhoods. The community identity was a big thing that also came out. There's a desire to maintain a small town feel, but there was also just a lot of uncertainty about what Belton's identity is right now and what it should be in the future. So helping to kind of establish that and create a unique identity that Belton has while maintaining that small town feel can help us kind of brand ourselves more regionally. And then community aesthetics. The strong desire to improve appearance of residential neighborhoods, streetscapes, and commercial corridors. That related to some of these other items, that in particular can be best addressed through zoning, setbacks, landscaping standards, and those types of things. Business growth and development. A majority of people that they spoke with really liked the recent growth in business and employment in the city and would like to see that expanded upon in the future. Parks and recreation, again, improving our existing parks and open spaces and planning for the future on those areas. Essential services, including the need to adequately staff EMS, police, fire, and how we can better handle homelessness, the homeless population in the city, while also coordinating with our neighbors on that issue. And then connectivity, which generally gets to the transportation side of the plan. A lot of ideas for increased capacity, not only for auto-oriented population, but also for bikes and pedestrians and how they can be accommodated into multimodal corridors. Any questions?
I think it was interesting for me to see with some of the things that they had done, especially the thing that caught my attention was how they used the school and went in and had high school kids come over to one of the grade schools and had them just kind of do some dreaming and planning out, did a box city, and getting some of that kind of input. That to me, I mean, a lot of the input that we heard here, I know was probably more adult feedback, but the fact that they are also listening to our kids, listening to our high school young adults as well. So I think that's great.
Yeah, the comprehensive plan really is a plan for all ages, so we want to make sure that everybody's included. And I mean, there's also interest in making sure that our students are engaged in this, because they may want to stay in Belton, and we want to make sure that Belton has the future that they desire it to have as well.
Absolutely. So, a lot of good work going on with that entire study.
Yeah, the next steps is there will likely be a steering committee in early February. I think we already have the date of February 5th for that steering committee. We are expecting to start getting some drafts from the Confluence team here over the next couple of weeks for us to start to review. And there will be some draft reviews at that February meeting. And hopefully we'll have a kind of a full draft to present to the Planning Commission later February or March.
Great. Excited to see it. Any other comments or questions for the director? So we'll leave it with you, Director. Do you have any additional information to report on?
Yeah, we do have several things. So last week at City Council, the City Council did approve a voluntary annexation of the former commuter lot at the corner of 58 Highway and Peculiar Drive. We determined that was never officially annexed into the city since it was previously MoDOT right-of-way. So that has now been officially annexed, and we will be bringing a rezoning forward on that property at the next meeting on January 2nd. Also on that meeting, we currently have some final plats for Autumn Woods, the townhomes there on Markey Parkway to bring forward. And then a couple of other applications that we're currently reviewing that will come to the commission either later in January or in early February include Autumn Ridge 5th plat, which is the final phase of Autumn Ridge for the single-family portion. There's 57 single-family lots there. And then we also received a preliminary development plan and preliminary plat for the Cass County Sheriff's Annex there at North Scott and 155th this week. So that will be coming forward as well. And so our next meeting will be on January 2nd. We will also have agenda items for January 16th and February 6th. So just keep putting those dates on your calendar. And so this is our last meeting of 2023. So we appreciate the commission's dedication this year, and wish everybody Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year. And I think we already had a lot of projects this year. I think we're gonna have a lot more next year. So
I'm glad that staff is keeping busy, and Mayor, just keep pushing them.
I'm working on it.
I know you are.
Tough job, but I'm getting there.
Only problem with that is the more that they do, the more we have to do. So I guess it's a good problem to have. But seriously, we appreciate staff and all that staff is doing. We got a great staff, got a great council, great leadership here in Belton right now, and appreciate all the work that everyone is doing to continue making Belton the kind of town we want to see it to be. So Any other items?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.